Gilbert Burns is the real BMF. After a dominant performance at UFC 283, Gilbert has literally called out everybody. And we see a lot of fighters that call out other guys or say they're willing to fight anybody, but once it comes down to actually signing the contract, they don't necessarily do it. But with Gilbert Burns, he's one of those guys that legitimately would fight anybody at any point. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm Juicy MMA, I make opinionative MMA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. But anyways, let's get into it. Ever since transitioning to 170, Gilbert Burns has been one of the better fighters in that division. He's already fought for the belt before against the former dominant champ in Kamaru Usman, and actually even had him hurt significantly early on. Now of course in the end it didn't go Gilbert's way, but overall it was a very impressive performance against a very dominant champ at the time in Kamaru Usman. But besides that performance, Gilbert also has a lot of impressive victories at welterweight, with wins over guys like Tyron Woodley, Damian Maia, Wonderboy Thompson, and others as well. And after that extremely dominant performance over Magny, he was basically able to finish the fight in whatever way he wanted, but that further proves that Gilbert belongs at the top of the division. Now that's something that most people already knew, but this just further reiterates that. But now the question is, why is Gilbert so good? What does he do well out there? So starting with his stand-up abilities, I would say Gilbert is a good striker. He's not necessarily the most technical, but I do think he is very effective. He has a pretty nice jab, he has a pretty nice left or right straight, whatever stance he's in. He has a nice uppercut, hooks, he has very nice kicks to the legs, nice kicks to the body, even sometimes kicks to the head. In close, I would say he has nice knees and elbows, and overall in terms of his stand-up ability, I would say he has a lot of different abilities. But the reason why, in my opinion, I think he's a very good striker is due to that power that he possesses. Gilbert has a ton of power. We've seen him knock out guys like Damian Maia and others in the past. And to further reiterate how much power Gilbert does have, he did hurt Kamaru Usman significantly. And Usman's a guy who's known for having a phenomenal chin. Now he did just get knocked out by Leon Edwards, but that was a perfectly timed head kick. Gilbert was able to hurt Kamaru significantly with a punch. Now on the feet, I would say his biggest weakness is certainly his chin. He does tend to get hurt a lot, especially with that southpaw jab, as for whatever reason he's just not able to see it all that well. But even besides that, I wouldn't say Gilbert has the best chin in the welterweight division. But besides that, I would say he's very well rounded on the feet. Now moving on to his ground game, he's tremendous at this. I would say he has pretty good wrestling, but of course the biggest area and the biggest strength of his ground game is his great jiu-jitsu. We just saw it in his last matchup against Magny, as he was able to submit him very easily, take his time and find the submission. But even besides Magny, Gilbert's able to have success on the ground against basically anybody. We just saw in his last matchup against Khamzat Chimaev that Chimaev didn't want to go to the ground with Gilbert Burns, which is crazy considering how good Khamzat is on the ground, but that kind of shows you how good Gilbert is on the ground as well. Now I'm not necessarily saying that Gilbert would have the better of Khamzat on the ground, but the fact that Khamzat didn't want to take it there really should tell you something about how good this guy is on the ground. Now I would say besides his individual skills, like his really good stand-up ability, his great power, his great jiu-jitsu, I would say another thing that really differentiates him from a lot of other guys is his heart. We see it in his training videos. This guy trains extremely hard every time out, but especially when he's out there in a fight, he always pushes the pace and he always seems to be the fresher fighter. Even in that Khamzat fight, as it was a very high pace, both of those guys were very tired. It's not like Gilbert wasn't, but he certainly was the fresher fighter between him and Khamzat, and he's just willing to take it to that next level and continue to push himself further and further. So due to that mentality, alongside with all the other individual skills that he does have and his power, that in my opinion makes him such a great fighter. But now the next question is, where does Gilbert Burns go from here? Because in my opinion, that win over Magny doesn't really do all that much for Gilbert. It was just a fight that he took because literally nobody else wanted to fight him. But in my opinion, I think there's a lot of great different fights out there for him. I think him versus Colby Covington is a very interesting fight. I know they wanted to do the Ultimate Fighter between those two guys, which would be phenomenal. I'd love to see that. But overall, I do think it's a very close fight. On the feet, I would probably give the edge to Gilbert just due to the power, but Colby Colby also is getting a lot better on the feet, and I would say he's actually pretty good at this point. Now on the ground, Colby is certainly the better wrestler by far, but Gilbert has tremendous jiu-jitsu, so it would be interesting to see how cautious Colby is on the ground if he decides to take it there. Another interesting matchup would be against Jorge Masvidal. Now on the feet, I would say Masvidal is a better striker, but if Gilbert wants to take it to the ground, he'll certainly have the big advantage in that regard. But that's also an interesting fight just due to the fact there is that danger on the feet with Masvidal. I do think Colby would be the tougher matchup for Gilbert, but at the same time, I do think there is somewhat of a risk with Masvidal just due to the knockout power that he does have, and the fact that I mentioned before, Gilbert doesn't have the best chin. Another interesting matchup out there is Belal Muhammad. I do think Gilbert Burns would be able to beat Belal. Belal certainly has a better wrestling, but on the feet, I would certainly give a decent edge to Gilbert Burns, especially in terms of power, but just overall striking as well. I think Gilbert's the better striker. Now on the ground, once again, Gilbert's going to have the advantage in the jiu-jitsu department, although Belal will be a better wrestler. And all three of those matchups that I just mentioned are fights that Gilbert himself is calling for. Now if someone else wanted to fight him and the UFC allowed it, I'm sure Gilbert would accept it. Actually, I know for a fact he would accept it. He accepts fights against literally anybody. For example, if a guy like Shavkat didn't have an opponent and they wanted to bump him up to a guy like Gilbert Burns, I guarantee Gilbert would take that fight, even though Shavkat, similar to Khamzat, is extremely dangerous and someone who most fighters are scared of and don't want to fight at this point. But with Gilbert, he doesn't care. He'll literally fight anybody out there, and I really do respect that about him. But as I mentioned, I do think there are a lot of great matchups for Gilbert, but I guess we're going to have to wait and see who actually accepts it going forward. Now, I will say for Colby Covington, he does have a potential matchup against Khamzat. I don't know if that matchup will get made, but there have been a ton of rumors about it, and I do think that's the next logical fight for both Colby and Khamzat. If Colby wins that, he should get a title shot. If Khamzat wins that, I think he should also get a title shot. So in my opinion, that fight makes a ton of sense, but if that doesn't happen, I love the matchup between Colby and Gilbert. And I guess from Colby's perspective, if he beats Gilbert Burns, I think he should get a title shot. I don't know if the UFC is going to grant him that, but I think at the very least he should. But with a win over Khamzat, he definitely would get a title shot, so that might be more appealing to him. But I guess only time will tell what does end up happening with Gilbert Burns and his future opponents. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Gilbert Burns is the real BMF of the UFC, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these two videos popping up now. And until the next time, peace out, guys.